So we want to say greetings to our people. This video may end up somewhat long. We're jotting down some notes based on the various things that have been coming our way over the past couple of months in relation to people's overstanding and misunderstanding. You know, we realized that we were assuming that people understood certain concepts. So in this video, we want to talk about the Kilombo Muntu and the Kilombo itself indirectly. Kilombo Muntu is the term we use for a Maroon. So there have been a few, there's been one new onlooker of the video. So to describe to you what a Maroon is, if you look up the Maroons, a lot of this stuff you got to take upon yourself to do your studying. You can't rely on everybody to give you everything. The Maroons are the ones who escaped captivity, so-called slavery. But not only escaped, but they formed communities, viable, functional communities where they had blacksmiths. They even had their own kind of banking systems. There were no banks as it were at that time as it is now. But they had their own systems for that, trading and bartering and whatnot. They had their own rules, their laws. All this was based on the African culture, for the most part, that they were stripped away from. You know, the further in time we got through captivity, through slavery, you had less Maroon camps. As they were destroyed by traders, or they were informed on by Indians. You know, a lot of people love to say they got Native American in them. And even if you do, there's nothing to brag on. You know, it's like a lot of people, brag on having Yovo, so-called white blood in them. There's nothing to brag on. You're basically bragging on the fact that you got the enemy within you for real, for real. So the Maroon is one who seeks liberation and sovereignty. The modern Maroon, Kilombo Muntu, that term means a person of the Kilombo. The Kilombo is the idea of sovereignty, land, how you rear your children. All that is based on your culture. You know? So that's the Kilombo is the space, the ideology also, and Kilombo Muntu. Muntu means a true human being in the Kibantu language. So Kilombo Muntu, the true human, seeks to be of the Kilombo, whether it's mindset, the actual living on the land type of thing, communities or whatnot. And this goes from this so-called religious ideology all the way to their spiritual practices. So, by the way, sorrel is good for you. Hibiscus, sorrel, it's called bisop. That's what we're drinking on now. And it's a leaf. It's red. And you can just boil it like, you boil a tea. Boil it right in the water and sift it out. And you could sugar it up if you want. It has a tart flavor. It's the national drink of Senegal. They drink it all day, every day. And people wonder why their skin is so beautiful, like Senegalese and all that. That's part of it. Why, a lot of them can run and they don't get tired. That hibiscus, bisop is good for that. So, getting into this, we are titling this the true Kilombo Muntu, the true Maroon, because there are misconceptions about what we should be doing now. This whole video is about what we should be doing now and forward, and what we should have been doing. And this is in the spirit of Marcus Garvey, because ultimately our ideology is a Garveyite type of philosophy. So the true Maroon is not obsessed with the past to the exclusion of the present. We have some Maroons whose heads are on backwards and they can only look in the distant past. They're so concerned with the past until they stumble over the present and cannot see what is coming in the future, right in their face. They grovel and revel in the great glories of the past, like the great pyramids. You know, we built all these great civilizations, to the absence of the future. To the true Maroon, there is a thoroughgoing concern with the constructing of the now and the future. There is not merely an ongoing, exclusive, and compulsive concern with things that were, but with things as they are and things as they shall be. The true Maroon is forward-looking and futuristic. Back in the day, I saw in a lot of conferences and little gatherings and whatnot, there were very few people concerned with what was going to happen that next year or the next couple of months or whatnot, you know. But the question should be, what must we do today to secure the survival and advancement of African people immediately here around your immediate survival, your survival area, and, you know, then by region and nation, then worldwide. What must we do to fight off the threat of the Asian takeover of the world? Everybody wants to talk about the white man. We're not only confronted with the so-called white man today, we're also confronted with other people in the world. We're confronted with the rise of Asian civilization. Are we to throw off or to see the death of the European civilization, only to fall under the yoke of the Asian civilization? Some of you are familiar with our teaching about the fact that we were the ones where the Asians are now. We should be. That was supposed to be, even according to the oracles, that's where it's supposed to be. But we failed in that because we have not listened to our oracles. We still don't listen to our oracles, but we love to tout being African. We can look out in our streets today and see it's there, you know. It's around us everywhere. The invasion of our communities by the Asian units is a sign of times to really come. See, this is not even the big one. The Afrikan is at a crossroads today where African people must not only evoke their great past, that's cool, but now they must evoke their future as well and create that future. We are in total control of this. The true Maroon does not escape and hide through the glorification of the past what must be done in the present and the future. The bogus Maroon, the bogus black nationalists, RBG types, however, rises and raises up the people, builds up a false pride in the people in terms of past history, but they leave them groping as to what must be actually done, especially in the present. Some of you may be familiar with this. They leave them feeling high, and mighty, you know, all, you know, like Novocaine. You know, that's what Malcolm X talked about, how that's what that religion, that them other religions do for you, you know. But they leave you high and mighty when they walk out of the lecture halls, auditoriums, and their churches. And, you know, these black nationalists doing all this stuff in these churches, with his oratory ringing in their ears, only to face the Korean stores once they get outside, only to face the communities taken over by Arabs and Hispanics and other groups. And with that ringing oratory and rhetoric, they must face the reality that while the knowledge of history is wonderful, great, and a necessary part of our resurrection as a people, it is not going to be our sole basis of salvation. Besides concerning ourselves with our past, we must concern ourselves with now and must use the now to create the future. The true Maroon nationalist is intrepid. Not that the Maroon does not have fear, but they learn to operate in spite of fear. Fear does not paralyze them. They use fear as energy to move forward and to confront enemies. We do not hide this fear behind high-sounding phrases, high-sounding scholarship, and dredging up the past. We dredge up the past as a means of integrating it into the personality, as a foundation for this movement forward and thrust into the future, for us. And these are, just bear with us for a second, these are notes that we jotted down when we were out earlier that we decided to go ahead and put on video. The Maroon does not put forth a kind of pseudo gain, as we see many nationalists, and so, you know, many of them don't use the term Maroon, but they probably will be starting to use it soon. But as we see many nationalists and so-called Maroons, people putting forth a sort of participate with establishing, sort of arouse the revolutionary fervor of their audience. But when you stop and think about it, they have left you with no real tools and techniques for dealing with our current problems, and do not project the future and what it will be like. So if you got the so-called nationalists, black RBG, whatever they are, talking a lot of rhetoric, but they're not talking about the future in any serious way, in any way of building, nation building, as we say, then that's questionable. The true Maroon is entrepreneurial. They're about building something. Even if they don't have it at that time, they have plans. They are totally in the spirit of entrepreneurship, even when they don't have their own. Some have had their own and lost in this capitalistic society, and they're back on the path towards that. Some, you know, are trying to build toward that. That's the true Maroon. That Maroon is constructing something of you know, of merit. They're not just concerned about the past, not just identifying with ancient Tamaray, or so-called Kemet, ancient Egypt, and other great African empires of the past, not just picking up a little detail upon little detail of some African past, but of sound movement forward in concrete brick and mortar construction. And when I say brick and mortar, you know, actual applicable stuff that we are able to use. So that's just a metaphor. Hands-on development, you know. We not only respect our ethnic heritage and the glories of our ancestors, but equally, if not more, we're concerned with the inheritance one is going to pass on to our children. Therefore, we are concerned with ate baye baye in the Yoruba language, which is intergenerational, interconnecting, line after line. There are people who scrape their monies together, give it to the airlines, the Arabs, jump out the plane, bowl, scrape and kiss the earth just to salve their own wounded egos. But when asked for $1,500 towards their own, the feeding of their own children, or funding of something of their own, toward the educating of our children, toward the creation of jobs for our people, toward the gaining and control of our real estate, and the gaining control of our wealth, somehow they're not able to make these sacrifices, not even $20 sometimes. They're willing to worship the pyramids of 4,000 years ago, but will not build pyramids in the present so their children may see what they left behind. So we have then a leadership who rallies the people to look at past glories but leave their own children neglected, who will make great analytical and oratorical dissertations on the inadequacies of Eurocentric education, and yet will not contribute one penny of their monies and their time to the construction of their own schools, of their own temples, who year after year will spend millions and give it away to the others, but will not give it to their young. Now, and we're talking about pseudo-nationalism, because you could easily go to and say, okay, this is you're talking about the Christians and the Negro and the house Negro. Well, by the way a lot of these so-called nationalists act, they act just like them. They might not be in the employ of their enemy directly, but they are here through their actions. So the true nationalist, the true Maroon, is about building. The true Maroon is not obsessed about the destruction of their civilizations, about the cruelty of their fate and the devilishness of their enemies. Certainly, we analyze that and look at it. Certainly, we lament the destruction of black African civilizations and the fall of our empires and kingdoms and monarchies, and our fall from grace. But within a certain range, within perspective. We do not become traumatized by those falls and destructions. We do not become obsessed and compulsive about their analysis. We look at them, we learn from them, we integrate them into our personality and ideology. We swear never again. And we move forward using this knowledge to construct a new civilization. Nation building all the time. We look at the mistakes of our ancestors, and we're able to do that. We're man and woman enough to do that. We're not sitting around here just talking about glories. We look at the mistakes of the past civilizations, and we integrate those mistakes into our collective personality, individual and collective personality. We then move forward to build new civilizations, communities, new worlds, and new monarchies. Not just lament on the ones of the past. What does that do? America, they lament, they speak of Rome and Greece, but they ain't lamenting because they built one. And their capital buildings, capital cities, they show you how they took from that past. And many of us believe that they don't worship their ancestors because they tell us that that's evil and that's not really Christian and whatnot. No, it's not Christian. And we're proud of that, but they do it. Mount Rushmore, all these statues, Confederate statues in Washington, D.C., statues in Austin, Texas, Capitol buildings made like Roman Parthenons. They're doing it. And we're doing our part too, but this video series is about changing our mindset. We are not exclusively on the studying of the past, but we seek to study and determine the future. We open ourselves up to all kinds of knowledge and information as a way of getting to know reality. That word, reality. Many of us, we do not know what reality is. Even in African tradition. Once again, we are primarily speaking to people that are taking the steps in towards African tradition or already in African tradition. And we're letting you know that even your mindset has to change. We don't spend a lot of time sputtering impotent rage against our oppressors. Rage doesn't advance our interests, but we work calmly and steadfastly to bring into being a new order, which is the natural order, the original order, based on Besu, the divine law, as we say in Vodun. We do not indulge in ancient and esoteric ceremonies merely to savage our wounded egos, as we see a lot of people in these African traditions today. Wounded pride, and merely to divert our interests and to expend our time. We do not get carried away in moons, numbers, and so forth as a way of guiding our life. Just follow us on this now. We recognize that while we may be into phases of the moon and the movements of the planet, the real world moves by the operation of the hand, brick and mortar being stacked one atop the other. We may recognize the ancient deities, but we recognize, for instance, in the case of these great civilizations, they were all built by the hands of African women and men. We may get into traditions like Vodun, the Abosom tradition of the Akan, Odinani of Igbo, Isheshe, all of that. But ultimately, we must come back down to earth and deal with the real things that are happening right here. And so, in our case, we employ those traditions for the real world that we're dealing with as we employ our hands in conjunction with the deities. There's nothing wrong with using astrologies, and we want to go towards the proper African astrologies, esoteric traditions of our birthright, moons, planets, all that. But let us not become obsessed with them to such a degree that we do nothing else. That's, once again, that's very Christian, the very thing that people criticize, we're just going to leave it in the hand of the deities, just very similar how the Christians may say we're going to leave it in the hands of God. In fact, in our daily life, to be honest, the most retarded people we see in terms of economic, social, political, and personal development are the ones who know the most about the moon, most about the planet, most about numbers, most about talk the most about the Orisha, an African spirituality. And our questions are, when are you going to use that stuff for your own self-advancement, for your family advancement, for your community advancement, for nation building? How is it that you can give all this great and wonderful advice and you never give it from the perspective of functionality? We have to differentiate between quote unquote religion, spiritual tradition, whatever, an ideology, and an esoteric ceremony that works for and serves us. We need to jettison a belief that requires our service and yet does not advance our interests and thus does not change our political, social, economic condition. You got a tradition, but it's not working for you. Now what? But, most of the blame is not necessarily on the tradition. It's on how it's used, or for the lack of use thereof. There are a lot of people out there who are doing ceremonies, serving up ideologies, but whose ceremonies and ideologies are not doing any service for them. We can differentiate between the pseudo-Maroon, pseudo-nationalists, and the true Maroon nationalists in the question of not whether the tradition is working, but how they are using it. Are they using it for liberation, for sovereignty, or is it just for empty ritual? Something that, this is what we're supposed to do on this particular day. Brief look at the Asians right quick. If you study a bit of Asian culture, you will recognize that at its very center is ancestor worship. Like great respect for the ancestors. At the very center is a huge and long history built around tradition. But one of the things that puzzles the Yovo, and I guess a lot of African people worldwide, as they look at the Asian, is that though the Asian highly respect their ancestors and engage in tradition, at the same time, technologically, they equal and advance over everybody else. The Asian very clearly shows that one can still respect, love, and worship the ancestors, yet still be very much into the world of today. can still move and advance technologically and otherwise beyond his or her enemies. And that's the thing, they know who their enemies are, no matter how humble or meek they might try to come across sometimes. They know who their enemies are. We don't. The worship and respect for the ancestors and respect for tradition do not imply that we cannot concern ourselves with the immediate and with the future. The correct worship of ancestors and the deities and the correct praise of tradition is the foundation for an advancement in the future. The pseudo-nationalist, I should say, engages his or her people in the obsessive worship and praise of ancestors to the destruction of their future concerns and that of their children. The true Maroon not only educates the wounded egos of adults, but also educates his young. We see many of these nationalist organizations concern themselves weekend after weekend, month after month with these lectures and stuff with the education of grown people. That's fine as part of the education process and advancement of African people worldwide. But we must recognize that we have to educate our young as well as that the true survival of the race must couple the education of the parents with the education of the young. A lot of the young are not being educated. So that's where the complaint is a lot of the time, that the young are not doing this and that. That's because the children haven't been educated. The children are just expected to dress up for the event, to go to the Kwanzaa event or the Sunday Elay. Elay supposedly, the word Elay is used by people here to refer to the Orisha temples, as they call them. Dress up, go to the Elay. No real education being really handed out to them. Nationalist organizations that are concerned almost exclusively with the education of adults and not with the education of children are practicing a nationalism that is incomplete. And we basically can say, if we look at Marcus Garvey type of model, they're not practicing nationalism. A true nationalist knows that he or she must educate, as the word nationalism implies, the nation, and that's everyone. So we could take that into the realm too of with the women. We see a lot of the women doing this leg work in the tradition, but they're not, they're not being rewarded for their leg work. And B, that shouldn't be. A lot of the men are sitting on these podiums and whatnot, talking a lot of stuff that really ain't hitting, but they receive all the glory and all any of the good fallout from it. They receive it. That got to stop, and that's not the way of Ganlodo. So. The true nationalists and Maroons recognize the unity of the relationship between education and building, its interrelationship with politics, economics, and even spiritual traditions. She is not just a specialist. We're not the real Maroons and real nationalists are not centered around some special concern, just concerned with jobs or legal aspect or just religion, like a lot of them are. Well, few of them are. We're concerned with all aspects that have to do with the advancement of African people, all aspects of human everyday life. And we will start with part 2 of this video after this. Odigba.